Nicolas Cage is hell on wheels in Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance. A controversial children's classic comes to the big screen in the Lorax. And Disney spends hundreds of millions of dollars on a film with the least commercially viable title they can come up with in John Carter. Grab the popcorn and settle in. It's time for Slick Flicks. Hello, and welcome to Slick Flicks. I'm Patrick Gibbs. And I'm Paul Gibbs. And in this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the first set of really big-budget, high-profile releases of 2012. The ones that have had their trailers played approximately 4 billion times over the past 3 months. And one of them was filmed right here in Utah, and we'll be chatting with a member of the crew of that film, who should be familiar to Slick Flicks viewers. But first up, we're going to take a look at the latest from Marvel Comics. Nicolas Cage hits the road once again in Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance. But is this a joyride or a trip to purgatory? Paul, give us your thoughts. It's very common for sequels to be pale shadows of their predecessors. If the original was, say, Jurassic Park, a modern classic, then that disappointing sequel can still be a decent movie. But if the original was Ghost Rider, you're in trouble. The 2007 Nicolas Cage vehicle was, at best, a guilty pleasure. The 2012 sequel, Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance, is at best entertainingly bad. This is a film that not only features an imaginary sequence of its hero urinating fire, it actually goes back and repeats the sequence. Cage once again stars as Johnny Blaze, a former motorcycle stunt rider who made a deal with the devil to save his father's life and ended up as the Ghost Rider, a cross between the Grim Reaper and the biker from the Village People. Blaze is now in hiding, trying to avoid becoming the Rider. The duality of the character much more closely resembles the Incredible Hulk this time around. Blaze comes out of hiding when a mysterious figure named Moreau, played by Idris Elba, approaches him. Moreau is part of some strange, tough guy apocalyptic religious order that plays like something out of The Road Warrior as written by Dan Brown. He needs the Ghost Rider to protect a young woman and her child who, it turns out, is supposed to grow up to be the Antichrist. Now we're doing Terminator 2 meets The Omen. Directors Mark Neveldine and Brian Taylor can't decide whether they're doing a straight-up sequel or a reboot. So even though we have the original actor playing the Ghost Rider, there's so much revisionism in the backstory that it makes for a rare sequel that's actually harder to follow if you've seen the original. And their directorial style is definitely of the throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. Unfortunately, just about the only thing that does stick is a fairly exciting chase sequence toward the end of the film. The cast is made up of talented actors giving bad performances. Of course, Cage is making a career out of this these days, and since there are volumes to be spoken about that, let's cover the others first. Kieran Hines replaces Peter Fonda as the devil, who is called Rourke this time. Hines is actually one of my favorite actors working today, but his outrageous overacting here is humiliating. Idris Elba actually comes out okay because he seems to know he's in a bad movie and he appears to be having some fun with it. Now, let's take a moment to wonder if Nicolas Cage himself made a deal with the devil early in his career, and films like this are his punishment. In movies as diverse as Raising Arizona, Peggy Sue Got Married, Adaptation, and Matchstick Men, Cage has given brilliant performances. He won an Academy Award for his work in Leaving Las Vegas. He even made Face Off work. But now, with only the occasional exception, his presence is a sure sign of a bad movie. And the quirky personality that once made him unique has now just become a soulless parody of itself. For a former fan, watching Cage give a performance like this one it's like watching someone you love die slowly and painfully, and you have to wonder if his career should be euthanized to put us all out of our misery. The only real way to enjoy Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance is on a Mystery Science Theater 3000 level. I have to admit, I had more fun marveling at the badness of this dumbfounding misfire than I have with some recent, merely mediocre films from the past few months. But if the phrase "so bad it's good" confuses you, stay far away from this one. Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance barely squeaks by with a D- because of that final chase scene, but it's still likely to make my worst of the year list. This is a terrible film. It is really a terrible film, and what astonishes me about this film is that, first of all, that it managed to get made at all. Second, that there was actually some positive internet buzz going into this, that somehow the idea that, okay, we're taking Ghost Rider and we're going to do a sequel to it, but this time we're turning it over to the guys responsible for Jonah Hex. And there was anybody out there that actually thought this was going to be good.
Yeah, we should mention, we talked about this being from Marvel Comics. It's not from Marvel Studios.
And that's an important distinction.
Right, the people who made Iron Man and Thor and Captain America. So they shouldn't have to take blame for this. But you know what really, above all else, just frustrates me about this movie is that so many people out there don't even realize anymore that Nicolas Cage was once a great actor. It's becoming harder to be an apologetic Nicolas Cage fan than it is to be an apologetic Kevin Costner fan. And I just try to make people remember these guys were really, really good at one point.
Absolutely, and Cage really, at one time, he was an actor that I could watch in anything, and up to a point, I can even watch him in some of his bad films.
If I'm going to watch Slicc, I'd usually prefer Nicolas Cage to be in it because that makes it more enjoyable on a certain level. He sometimes has a lot of fun with these performances. And like I mentioned, Face Off, that is an utterly silly movie. And to me, Nicolas Cage gave a sincerity in his performance there that elevated that. It's something that I really enjoyed. But he's just going through the motions now, but going through the motions ramped up to 11 and just hysterical.
Absolutely, and I think that that's one of the distinctions. In some of his past outrageous performances in stupid films, there's a sense that he's either having some sense of fun or throwing himself into it as an actor. This movie, honestly, it comes across like he's hungover and doing an impression of himself. There's just no effort put into it, and yet it's still way over the top.
And the continuity between the two films is so confusing, so inept and non-existent. They refer to this as a reboot-quel, basically not committing to whether they're starting over or keeping the continuity from the last film, and it just becomes so confusing because, you know, it's one thing when they do that, switching from Batman and Robin to Batman Begins, starting a totally different series. It's even one thing when they switch from Batman Forever to Batman and Robin and just switch actors playing Batman. But they've kept the same actor playing Ghost Rider here. It's not a reboot, it's a sequel.
Absolutely.
And they've just totally thrown out the continuity of what happened in the first movie.
The only thing that has really been rebooted is Nicolas Cage's face, whatever has been done to it. He looks like he's had some sort of strange facelift. It's actually kind of painful to look at him at times. But the movie, I really did try to enjoy this. As stupid as the first Ghost Rider is, there were some real guilty pleasure moments in that. When Sam Elliott and Nicolas Cage are riding through the desert on horseback and on the motorcycle with Ghost Riders in the sky playing. I liked the movie in spite of itself.
Well, and that one, it didn't have a great story, but it had a story.
Exactly.
As the filmmaker Charles Kaznick would say, it's got flow. It moved through 3 acts and told a complete story, even if it was really stupid a lot of the time. This one might as well start its way in the middle and work its way out to both ends. It's just chaotic from start to finish.
Absolutely. And you talk about actors making deals with the devil and just making bad stuff from here on out. What's the deal with the fact that Christopher Lambert started out, the beginning of his career was his performance in Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes.
Well, yeah,
and it's just a fantastic movie, and he's done nothing but garbage since then. And somebody out there is watching and thinking, what about The Highlander? I'm including The Highlander.
Right. This is all around a depressing waste of talent from the people in front of the camera. I'm not sure, I'm convinced that the people behind the camera have a great deal of talent.
I'm convinced that the people behind the camera, let's see, I'm trying to think of something complimentary to say, and all I can think of is that they're biodegradable.
Yeah, this was sadly just just a waste of time. I wouldn't recommend this to anybody but really diehard fans of the first Ghost Rider, and I don't think there are any. There are just people like us who kind of enjoyed it on a guilty level.
Let's be honestly, even for people like that, it's kind of depressing. The only people that this film can be recommended to are people who want to go when there is a small audience and heckle at Mystery Science Theater 3000.
And it would be fun on that level. Moving on, our next film is the latest release from Studio Ghibli, based on the award-winning children's book, The Borrowers. Hayao Miyazaki presents The Secret World of Arrietty, and Patrick is going to share the secret with us.
Just a small-sized girl living in a lonely world, Arrietty is a borrower, one of a disappearing race of little people who live under the floorboards of houses. When little things go missing inside your house and you might have no explanation for it, it just might be the borrowers. But borrowers aren't thieves. They take only what they need. Arrietty is a spirited young girl living alone with her parents and reaching adolescence. She longs for more than her isolated world. She longs for excitement, friends, anything. When young Sean arrives at the house his mother lived in as a child to live with his great-aunt Jessica, Arrietty is intrigued by the boy. When Sean leaves the car, he sees a cat trying to attack something in the bushes. But the cat leaves after being attacked by a crow. Sean goes to see what the cat was trying to attack, and he catches a glimpse of Arrietty. That night, Arrietty's father, Pod, voiced by Will Arnett of Arrested Development, takes Arrietty above the floorboards to show her how he gets sugar, her very first borrowing. Their first stop is the kitchen, then a walk through a wall to reach a dollhouse in Sean's bedroom to get some tissues. Before Arrietty and Pod can leave, Arrietty notices Sean is awake and accidentally drops the sugar cube. Sean tells them not to be afraid of him. It's not long before things spiral out of control, and Arrietty's high-strung mother, Homily, voiced by Arnett's real-life wife, Amy Poehler, is terrified of being discovered, and talks of picking up and moving begins. But the lonely Arrietty may have found a reason to stay. Generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of anime, but Hayao Miyazaki doesn't make ordinary anime. I find his works to be wildly inventive and captivating, and once again, Disney has expertly adapted it for an American audience. Typical to the Disney treatment of Studio Ghibli films, this is a heavily Americanized take on the original Miyazaki screenplay, complete with American names replacing the Japanese names. Sho becomes Sean, for example, and American stars, including Disney Channel Flavor of the Month Bridget Mendler of Lemonade Mouth as Arrietty, and Poehler earning big laughs as the fragile Homily, not to mention the great Carol Burnett as the housekeeper, Hara. The film has been given a lot of American sensibilities, and it would be easy to forget that it wasn't made for English originally, without the little telltale signs, such as kanji writing or a worker drinking cold coffee out of an aluminum can. At the same time, the style and the spirit of the atmosphere are distinctly Miyazaki. There are a few moments in particular that shout out Miyazaki's influence on this magical world, and the result is really quite delightful. This is quite a grand adventure on a small scale, or vice versa, depending on your perspective, and Arrietty herself is quite the resourceful heroine. Based on the award-winning novel The Borrowers, which was actually the basis for a 1997 film, The Secret World of Arrietty may be a little bit more distinctly aimed at kids than Spirited Away or Howl's Moving Castle, but it's one that can be readily enjoyed by adults. And it's an excellent family film. The pacing is fast, the characters are involving, and the vivid world of The Borrowers is one that I could disappear into for a long time. This is a wonderful little movie that deserves an audience, and it's one that I could see many times. The Secret World of Arrietty is rated G, but it gets an A from me.
This is the best movie of 2012 so far as I'm concerned. I don't really have that much to add. You really kind of hit what I thought of the movie. It's just the kind of movie that you get lost in and the outside world stops existing while you're watching it. It's just so charming and full of heart and atmosphere that you just find yourself on a high from it for the rest of the day.
Absolutely. There are not a lot of movies that can be really summed up in one word, but this one can to me, and that word is enchanting.
Yes, it may be slow for some American audiences. I
Some American audiences are slow.
But well, if we had sponsors, we'd probably lose them over that remark. But really, I highly recommend The Secret World of Arrietty to just about anybody. It's just a great movie.
Absolutely. Hayao Miyazaki's films are just really a lot of fun. They're very creative. They're not for everybody, but I think that if people really gave them a chance, they'd find a lot to like. As I mentioned, I'm not an anime fan. In general, I don't get into that at all. And I had some resistance to Miyazaki at first, but you give it just a little while and it just pulls you in. And he's just so unique and creative. And this is such a fun story in and of itself. This is just a movie that I think everybody out there would have a lot of fun with.
There's a good chance this will stick around and make it to my best of the year list.
Very good chance.
When we return, we'll discuss the latest Dr. Seuss adaptation and a huge Hollywood blockbuster that was filmed right here in Utah.
Don't go away. Slick Flicks will be right back.
I'm Chris Kokish.
This is LJ Booth. I'm Chris Kokish.
Oh, that's right.
And we're here at the Bruin Bistro. And you are watching
SLCC TV.
Salt Lake City.
Welcome back to Slick Flicks. Our next film is the latest attempt to bring the magical world of Dr. Seuss to the big screen with an adaptation of the classic book, The Lorax. Paul, did you like it in a house? Did you like it with a mouse? What did you think of this film?
To start with, let's get the politics out of the way. The Lorax is a tree hugger movie based on a classic tree hugger children's book. It's never tried to hide that fact. If you're the type of person who is easily offended by environmental messages in children's movies, you should probably just steer clear of this one. But don't blame Hollywood, blame Dr. Seuss. Despite additions made to expand the story to feature length, they've stayed pretty close to the source material and completely true to its spirit. Personally, I happen to agree with the message of the book and the film, but even the best of messages can be hurt by bad presentation. Fortunately, that doesn't happen here. The Lorax is, to date, probably the best feature film adaptation of Dr. Seuss, although I did find quite a bit to enjoy in Horton Hears a Who. While it's inherently difficult to adapt the charmingly simple rhymed verse stories to feature length, this time it's been done with a gentle simplicity that doesn't detract from the work, unlike, say, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which for some reason decided it was a good idea to replace His heart was 2 sizes too small with He was abused and ostracized as a child and had his heart broken by a slutty Who played by Christine Baranski. Two stories play out simultaneously. Ted Wiggins, voiced by Zac Efron, is the kind of lovable, daydreaming adolescent protagonist who is semi-secretly in love with the girl next door, Audrey, voiced by Taylor Swift. Both reside in Thneedville, a plastic dystopia where no real trees or any sort of plant life has been seen in what appears to be several generations. In order to impress the girl by bringing back a real tree, Ted leaves Thneedville to find the mysterious Onceler, voiced by Ed Helms. The Onceler provides us with the film's principal narrative, the story of how he began chopping down trees to make a do-all product called a Thneed. I could just see them being advertised for order on basic cable. And encountering the Lorax, voiced by Danny DeVito, the guardian of the forest. The wraparound segments with Ted stray farther from the book, which features a young boy who goes to seek the Onceler to learn about what happened to the trees, but doesn't give him a love interest or his own story. I was less immediately charmed by them than I was by the main story, but I have to admit I was won over to them by the end of the film, and that includes Efron's likable voice performance. For me, nearly everything in the Lorax story worked. Thankfully, DeVito's performance captured the gentle wisdom of the beloved book character instead of just focusing on being loud and obnoxious as the trailers might suggest. And Helms fares equally well, including getting a chance to sing some bouncy tunes that Andy Bernard would annoy coworkers with for weeks. The various non-speaking forest animals are some of the best characters in the film, rendered by animation that is gorgeous and expressive. The Lorax isn't up there with the very best Pixar works, but it's an extremely solid animated film that will delight kids and should be at least fairly enjoyable to most adult audiences. It's one of the better films I've seen so far in 2012, and I give it a very enthusiastic B+.
Yeah, I'm leaning toward an A- on this one. I really liked this movie a lot. The biggest surprise for me is that It's pretty well known to people who know me that I've never been a Zac Efron fan. Just I don't get what the appeal of him is at all. And I thought he did a terrific job in this movie.
He really is very likable.
He really made that character somebody that I was rooting for. Maybe it was the fact that I didn't have to look at his blank, glassy eyes in this one, but it may be enough to make me change my mind on him.
I was a little bit anxious going into this one because I loved the book, The Lorax, so much as a kid.
This was one of the first books I ever really remember reading as a kid. It's an absolute classic to me.
And like I said, it's difficult to adapt Dr. Seuss into feature length.
Right.
I mean, I'm one of director Ron Howard's biggest fans, but I have a yearly tradition of watching his version of How the Grinch Stole Christmas again every December and being disappointed again at how much that just didn't capture the charm of the book. But it
didn't capture the charm of much of anything, really.
But that charm is there in the Lorax.
It's there in spades, and that can be attributed to the visuals, the clever script, the musical score by John Powell, who is a very underrated composer in my opinion. A lot of it can be attributed to Danny DeVito. I think this is the most enjoyable DeVito performance in quite some time. And I'm a big DeVito fan.
Well,
when he's on, he's really on. And it was nice to see, in the trailers, you only get the gruff, surly Danny DeVito, the kind of Louis De Palma personality, which is a hoot, of course, but it gets old after a while.
Yeah, but DeVito has this gentle sweetness and wisdom that comes out in some performances that people may not be expecting as much, but he really lends that to Lorax, and that's what makes the movie so memorable and gives it so much of its heart.
Right, because that is who the Lorax is as a character. That's the character from the book, and DeVito just captured that character spot on. It's really just a very fun movie with, I think, a really nice message. Yes, it's a somewhat controversial message. There are those, let's just be honest, there are those every time you have a movie aimed at kids with an environmental message, there are those who are saying, oh, you're pushing a political agenda, we shouldn't be talking to kids about this. I think we should. I think that kids should learn that taking care of the world around us is important. It's not shoving anything down your throat.
Well, and
it's not saying anything insidious.
And as I mentioned before, I think a real key is that there's been no attempt to disguise the message.
Right.
If you know the book at all, and really if you've seen the trailers, you know what you're getting into. So if people think they're going to be bothered by that, they've been warned and they just shouldn't see the film.
Absolutely. But for everyone else, this is a very solid piece of entertainment. And if you like Dr. Seuss, you're going to like this movie.
It's great for kids and it's fun for adults too.
Absolutely.
Our last film is a big-budget Disney sci-fi adventure that was partially filmed here in Utah. Patrick will tell us whether John Carter is out of this world.
First things first, yes, this is one of the dullest titles ever for a major blockbuster science fiction film. And no, it has nothing to do with the character Noah Wyle played on ER. Shortly after the Civil War, an embittered and war-weary Confederate veteran named John Carter, played by Taylor Kitsch, goes prospecting in Arizona. Captain Carter was quite the soldier in his day, and he speaks fluent Apache, and he's recruited by an Army colonel named Powell, played by Bryan Cranston, who is one of the great actors of our time, and once again is in a smaller role than he really deserves. And he's eager to enlist the aid of John Carter. But Carter's done with fighting. Having struck gold, he has better things to do with his time. But while evading Powell, Carter runs afoul of the Apaches. While hiding in a sacred cave, he is mysteriously transported to Mars, called Barsoom by its inhabitants. Carter finds that he has great strength and superhuman agility in this new environment as a result of its lesser gravity. He soon falls in with a nomadic tribe of green Martians called the Tharks, six-limbed, green-skinned aliens. And thanks to his strength and combat abilities, Carter rises to a high position in the tribe and earns the respect and eventually the friendship of Tars Tarkas, one of the Tharks chiefs, played by Willem Dafoe. The Tharks subsequently capture Deja Thoris, played by Lynn Collins, who is a princess of helium, a member of the humanoid red Martian race, and it's not long before Carter becomes embroiled in the political affairs of both the red and green men. Based upon the novel Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs, creator of Tarzan, John Carter was planet hopping long before Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon, let alone Han Solo or Luke Skywalker. It's the prototypical B science fiction space opera story, and it's silly, convoluted, and at times very cheesy. But it's also hands down one of the most enjoyable blockbusters I've seen in a very long time, transporting the audience back to the days of childhood wonders and rousing space adventures. I actually found myself wanting to talk my mom into taking me to the toy store to buy all the action figures, and then grudgingly remembering that I'm in my 30s. Director Andrew Stanton, who has given us some genuine modern classics such as Finding Nemo and WALL-E, makes a major impression with his first major live-action feature, though the designation is a little debatable. At least 2/3 of what you see on screen here is CGI. But Stanton and the other folks at Pixar have always known how to use the tool to tell the story rather than letting the story be an excuse to use the tool. While those two so-called kids' films are both much deeper and more profound than John Carter, the same level of commitment to detail and excellence in filmmaking is applied here, and this movie, pulpy and goofy as it is so breathtaking, so exciting, and so comfortable with its own silliness that it's very hard to find any real fault with it. The lead performances are very solid, with Kitch, best known for TV's Friday Night Lights and his appearance as Gambit in X-Men Origins Wolverine, showing a surprising amount of screen presence and star potential as Carter, though he seems to be doing a bit of a John Wayne impression, which somehow manages to work. And at times, he seems just a bit young for the role, particularly in the final section. Lynn Collins, who plays Princess Deja Thoris, ironically is best known for Wolverine also, which begs the question, did the folks at Disney Pixar actually watch that film and find something worthwhile? Collins also shows a lot of charisma and commanding presence. Let's face it, neither of these two are called upon to deliver Oscar-caliber performances. They're playing larger-than-life pulp figures, and they're there to be likable and to look good, exposing as much skin as they can in a movie released under the Disney label. And they succeed. Mark Strong, the Alan Rickman for the new generation, gives what can best be described as a Mark Strong performance. Nothing new, nothing earth-shattering or Mars-shattering, but as always, he makes a good villain. The best performances come from the Tharks. Willem Dafoe, Samantha Moore, Thomas Hayden Church, all of them go above and beyond to make these green, tusked Martians surprisingly believable. But I've got to admit, for me, this movie was all about the giant dog. In addition, the Moab scenery and the rousing score by Michael Giacchino, who's well on his way to becoming the next John Williams, are both absolutely stunning. This is not a deep or thoughtful film. It's not a great, profound story of vivid characters searching deep within their souls to find out who they are. It's a rollicking and unapologetic throwback to the golden ages of space fantasy, namely the early 80s, the early 40s, and of course, 1912, when Burroughs first put pen in hand and used his imagination to influence countless others for generations to come. This movie is pure fun and pure adventure, and I couldn't have enjoyed it more. I give it an A-. John Carter is rated PG-13 for profanity, violence, and mild sensuality. Don't let the Disney name fool you. This is not suitable for all ages.
Well, as we mentioned, a substantial portion of John Carter was filmed here in Utah, and our own beloved former co-host, Yelena Bakova, was a member of the John Carter crew. Yelena, it's great to have you back.
It's good to be back, guys.
It's like when George Clooney did a guest shot on ER after he had left. It's that big a deal having
But to be clear, John Carter still has nothing to do with ER.
Okay.
Or George Clooney.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with Patrick. I like this movie a lot. I think this is one of the most purely entertaining movies I've seen in a long time. It was
I've
a movie
seen
that
it 3 times now.
Yeah,
I've seen it 3 times too, and I completely agree with you guys. This is probably one of my favorite movies that I've seen in years. I've seen it 3 times, and I can't wait to see it again.
It's definitely one I can see going back several times. Like Patrick kind of talked about, I did find the story a little bit convoluted and hard to follow at times, but I didn't really care that much because the movie was just so much fun. It was
Now, I didn't find the story hard to follow at all, and yeah, I just want to throw that out there. Maybe it's just because I'm from a foreign country and I understand things pretty good sometimes.
Possibly, but I found myself confused as to the motivations and identities of the villains somewhat. I felt like maybe they were hoping to, they were deliberately holding some of that back and hoping to give more of it to us later in the sequels that I hope they get to make. It hasn't been doing very well at the box office so far.
Oh, really? No, I know that it was in the plans to have 2 more sequels written because when I was on set, I actually spoke with, give me a second. Okay, what was the director's name?
Andrew Stanton.
Mark Andrews was the screenwriter with Andrew Stanton, and he was actually the director for the second unit.
Oh.
And so he talked about the script ideas that they have for the future.
Great. Yeah, I have heard that there are talks here and they're hoping to make it a franchise, and I certainly hope they can. It was a very expensive film to make. Fortunately, it is doing better overseas right now than it's doing here, so hopefully that will be enough to make it.
It's
well, I think
kind
the
of
American
Tintin
audience is
syndrome.
probably a little bit disappointed because I think I feel like the films that have been coming out for a while now have been getting worse and worse. So I was actually really, really pleasantly surprised by John Carter because it was the kind of amazing movie that you go see and then you're happy afterwards. You're not feeling like The Immortals, for example. Did you guys see The Immortals?
No, I
did not.
Don't bother because as far as story, as developing characters, none of that. It's just like you said, they had tools and they wanted an excuse to put the tools to use. And
Well, I also think another reason why it might be doing better overseas, similar to Tintin last year, in other countries, people actually read. So they're familiar with the source material.
Yeah. Well, I do think that Disney also made some mistakes in marketing this film. Like you said, John Carter is not an exciting title. Now,
It's not.
If you're someone who grew up as a space geek, really into these sorts of things, names like Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers, those things jump out at me, and I know who they are. I have to admit, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that I didn't know who John Carter was until about 7 years ago, and he predates all of those. So he has this huge place in the history of science fiction, but I think most of us today don't really know the name John Carter. So I think that kind of left people confused, not knowing what they were going to see. I've heard people tell me, I didn't know whether I was seeing science fiction or a Roman Colosseum thing or whatever.
I was actually really disappointed because while we were filming, everybody was being told, and all the crew shirts and jackets and hats that we got, it always said John Carter of Mars. And so I kept telling people it's a movie called John Carter of Mars, which kind of tells you what the movie's going to be about.
Right.
So
And that was the name they were going under while shooting it, and all
even in
advanced
the end
materials
of the film,
said
that's
that.
what they say.
Right, even the end of the film comes up with the title John Carter of Mars. There have been a lot of varying stories coming out from Disney as to why they shortened it to John Carter. Some people say that it was because that they panicked because Mars Needs Moms didn't do well at the box office, that they decided there was a stigma against movies with the word Mars in them. And if you look at Mission to Mars in the 90s, and generally speaking, the word Mars is kind of a red flag that you've got a bad movie on your hands.
But that's certainly not the case here. This is
No,
a real good movie. We all agree on that. So, Yelena, tell us a little bit about what you did on the set of John Carter. What was your title on the crew?
My title on the crew and in the credits of the movie is video assist.
You are on the credits?
Yeah, I am.
I've looked for you 3 times on the credits and
well,
couldn't
that's
find you
because
anywhere.
the credits are scrolling paragraphs because there were so many people working on the film.
100. Like
So-
it was easy to find you on 127 hours.
Yeah, because the crew was much smaller.
We should mention that Yelena, who is also a former student at Salt Lake Community College in the film department, this is not the only big film on which she's worked as doing this video
That's
assist
right,
work.
Paul. I've also worked on 127 Hours and Den Brother and John Carter of Mars and
Tree of
Darling
Life.
Companion, and I forgot about Tree of Life. I worked on
So,
Tree of Life.
two Best Picture nominees in 127 Hours and Tree of Life. You put together a pretty impressive filmography.
Well, thank you.
I'm
But at the same
jealous of some of the
time,
people
most
you
of
worked
us who saw it want to forget about Tree of Life. So
I actually haven't seen it because I missed it coming out. I kind of overlooked it because it didn't come out for I think 3 or 4 years
right.
after I was actually working on it. So I kind of lost track of that film for a while.
So did Terrence Malick, so that's okay.
Okay, back to John Carter and Mars.
Yes.
I worked video assist on the film, and what video assist does is it's our responsibility to make sure that the monitors are set up and connected to the cameras and that we could record all the footage as it's being shot to do instant playback. Because even if you are shooting digital on film set, the camera department cannot take the time to actually stop production to do playback so the director could see what was shot. So it's our responsibility as video assist to do that. Now, I worked on John Carter of Mars for about 3 weeks. And for most of the time I was there, I was assistant to the main video assist on second unit. And my boss at the time was Galen Nebeker, and he owns Nebtech, which is a video assist renting facility. So a lot of the big films that come into Utah rent equipment from his store or studio, I'm not sure what you'd call it. And that's how I got the job, actually, is because I met Galen on Den Brother, which was my first Disney film, and then I kept working with him on different films. But so video assist job is to make sure that you have all the footage, and you record all the footage, and then you're able to do instant playback. And we were working in great old South Utah, and you have desert sand that's super soft and like 5 inches deep. And we were working in areas that were protected, like protected lands, and we were not allowed to pull carts across the desert because you might crush some plants. So everything had to be brought in by hand. And video assist, you're moving so much heavy cable and so many monitors that it's an impossible job for a single person to do. So I was brought in.
Person?
What?
What about a married person? I'm joking.
From now on, you don't talk to people.
That's
let's
right.
Go.
Yeah, because he's
I
getting married
haven't
and
had
you're
a chance to
staying
tease
single.
her in a long time.
Yeah, I know.
Let's go back to actually talking about something.
Yes.
So anyway, you were bringing in these.
So it was my job to, as the assistant, it was my job to actually help carry all the cables. And at one time, we actually had this 50-pound cart that we had to remove all the computer components from, and then I had it strapped to my back, and I had to backpack it through the desert about 50 yards to the spot where we were filming actually the Apache scene, the Apache fight sequence. And actually, that day that we fought the Apache fight sequence, I think it was that day or the next day, we also shot, I wish I could remember what the vehicle is called, but it looks like a giant four-wheeler that had it had a Ferrari engine, I think, and these amazing shocks, and it had a crane on it, and there was 4 seats in the car. One was for the driver, the director, the DP, or the camera operator, and then the focus puller. And they were actually in this vehicle driving behind that group of horses and filming them.
So wonderful. Were you on set during any of the sequences that they filmed with the Tharks, the big green CGI aliens?
Yes. I was there for some of that, but not very much, because since I was on second unit, we focused mostly on stunts and pickup shots. And
there were a lot of stunts in this movie.
So I was there. I was there for when they filmed, when John Carter jumps up, grabs the sword out of the air, and cuts the white ape.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
I was there.
That was one of my favorite parts of the entire movie.
Me too.
But the white ape wasn't there, of course.
No, the white ape was a big styrofoam head about this big that they had attached to a little crane thing that was on the back of a four-wheeler, and they drove it around the arena.
Wow.
So, yeah. The arena was what I was really impressed with. The arena, the center part of the arena below like the little throne area, it was actually built up. It was actually 3 or 4 shipping containers high, and they actually had shipping containers in a half circle, and the center was actually built up like real, and then on the sides they had green screen drapes that were massive. So
that's great. I can just
huge.
imagine what it would be like to actually be on the set for a sequence like that. It's so great. Now, and just from working on the films that we do on an incredibly small level, where we have probably less crew than they had to
do catering.
Right. I know how important it is to be able to watch back some form of the footage you just shot. So video assist is a very important job on the film.
Well,
so I think
thank
you. That's really great. And
no, it really is, because especially for things like, oh, well, a few days ago we shot this scene, and what was the person wearing? I can't remember. Oh no, the script, you didn't get it. What was it? And you could instantly play back that footage and show that to them. Or on John Carter of Mars, they actually had a really bad CGI version of the entire movie made ahead of time.
Oh, an animatic.
Yeah, sure. And So when I did playback for them, they would ask me to pull up the clips from the animatic and to make sure that their camera angles matched up to the way that they wanted it for the film.
Great.
Because John Carter, when I was around, was actually filmed on film and not digital.
Oh.
Oh, really?
And
that surprises me. I would have
Yeah.
assumed that they shot it digitally.
No, they shot on film, and also they were not shooting it true 3D.
Right.
They were just a single camera.
It
Yeah.
was 3D.
Fortunately, it is a high-quality post-production 3D conversion. I should point out to people in the audience thinking,
Yes.
oh no, 3D, I hate 3D. There's a difference between good 3D and bad 3D. And this is, for post-production conversion 3D, this is really good.
We've come a long way
yeah.
in that since
Well,
the days
actually,
of
I'm
Clash
getting
of the
really
Titans.
excited for The Hobbit because The Hobbit is being shot true 3D
Yes.
and 48 frames a second.
Right,
So.
which is supposed to eliminate some of that motion blur you get with 3D effects. So
Oh.
I'm excited for that
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So you are, as I said, a former film student here at Salt Lake Community College. Did your training here in the film department help you with the job you did on John Carter?
Absolutely. Specifically on John Carter of Mars, we actually used a little bit of. Oh, am I allowed to talk about certain products that they used on the films?
Go ahead.
Sure.
They used Final Cut Pro.
Don't mention Final Cut Pro. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
No, but seriously, I mean,
Yeah.
after the next version of Final Cut Pro, which is
Yeah.
no longer useful to professionals, it's kind of
Or
a bad,
anyone.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's a bad word now. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's specify. Final Cut Pro 7 is a good word. Final
was
Cut Pro
9.
X is. Oh well,
Yes.
anything before X is good.
Anything before X was useful to
Yes.
professionals. And so anyway, on John Carter of Mars, we actually used Final Cut to open up the clips and then match up different clips that they were shooting. What else was I going to say?
I don't know.
I saw the stunt double doing some of the big leaps where he has to rotate in the air and drop down and grab the sword. The first time he landed, I guess the ropes were a little loose and he hit the pads a little harder. But you know how stunt doubles are. They just walk it off and pretend nothing happened. Oh, I got a great story. Okay, so there was just, this movie was great. There were, I think the post-production they took back to England. And we had a few people on set that were from England, and they had worked on Prince of Persia, actually. A couple of the guys did. And they were kind of younger CGI guys. And after filming, we'd always go out somewhere and get some food as a group, you know. And the director, Mark Andrews, had a bet.
Andrew Stanton.
No, the
The second unit director, of
second
course.
unit director, yeah.
Yes.
He had a bet with one of the guys, and I wish I could remember his name, but I can't. They had a bet that whoever lost at pool would have to wear a full skin green suit for the next dinner. And so the director's playing against this kid, and the kid is just winning. I mean, he's got everything in, and the director's got still 5 balls on the table, and the kid's like getting all cocky and stuff, and then he accidentally shoots in the 8 ball, and he lost. And it was so awesome, because he was like, the guy was just totally losing, but so it was a great deal of fun being on the set. I really, really loved it. I met a lot of really cool people and had a lot of fun.
And you got to work on a really good movie.
I did.
Well, Yelena, it's so great to have you back here on a number of levels. This is really a lot of fun, and I think it's great to give people watching an idea of some of the opportunities that are available to people who go through the film program here at Salt Lake Community College. You learn a great deal and
Absolutely.
can go on to work on some great projects. Well, that's it for Slick Flicks today. Since Yelena is back after so long, we're going to let her do the final send-off and finish up this episode.
Well, thank you. All right, that's it for Slick Flicks. Turn off your cell phones and don't talk to the screen. It can't hear you.